So this is going to be rather interesting. Over the past couple of weeks, I've really enjoyed a lot of the videos that Broken Ronin has been doing when it comes to this character versus that character isn't close. You've probably seen the titles, you've probably watched some of the videos. It's become very popular. Now, I've seen him do it first, so I always appreciate a good title and a good format for videos. However, I'm not a death battle person. I enjoy watching them, but I can't speak on them. Instead, I thought I would kind of change up the internals of the idea and do character comparisons, which is something that has always lingered in the back of my mind, but now seems like a good time with the popularity of pitting two characters together. So my appreciations to Ronin. Please go watch his videos, they're very good. I figured the best place to start would be starting with Denji and Asa, two very different characters that, funny enough, share a lot of similarities, but how they uphold themselves, how they navigate throughout the story, and their overall impact is vastly different. I have 3 categories. Each are going to be graded individually and then combined to give a final score for that character. So you'll have to wait and see who comes out on top, but you can also play along as well and grade alongside me. These are the 3 categories: physical traits, behavioral traits, and dialogue. Physical traits are quite literally that, the physical appearance of a character. This is very important. Their hair color, do they change clothes constantly? Are they super buff? What gender are they? There's something very powerful about a first impression. The second, behavioral traits, quite literally habits and decision making of that character within the world. Their quirks, behavior, and attitude within the narrative that tells a lot about who they are internally. And lastly, dialogue. This is not only about what a character says, but also how they say it. What word choice do they use? Does their wording reflect their character? Are they outspoken? Are they rather shy? Are they educated? Etc. Everything will be labeled so you don't get lost, but let's start off with Denji and his physical traits. When you look at this boy, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Nothing all too crazy, right? He's wearing like a long sleeve tie with some dress pants. His hair's probably the most telling thing, being that it's blonde, which normally within Japan is someone that is either foreign or a delinquent. But off first glance, there's nothing all too telling until you start to see him move within the story, how he upholds himself and the type of body language that he brings across. He ends up creating a very powerful draw. What I mean by this is that he grabs a lot of your attention because he's very animated. When it comes to his facial expressions, these sharp razor teeth that he has, how he reacts to other characters, you can basically read his body language, where he sits kind of mentally or emotionally within situations just by how he's holding himself up physically. A lot of the times when he's down or in the dumps, he hunches his shoulders over. He might be a little bit nervous or just a little bit out of it. But in comparison, watching him go into his chainsawman form, he's super open. He's bombastic and crazy and filled with so much life, almost like his body is just liquid. He's loose and having fun. This approach is wonderful within Chainsaw Man. It does a lot to give you a better understanding of Denji's character, how he reacts within the moments and within situations that may be even more intimate, just based on his genuine reactions. He's very animated in that regard. So you don't even have to have much dialogue because the physical artistry tells it for you. Where this really gets challenged is facial expressions, something that Fujimoto is very much known for. Some of the most detailed points of interest that you'll be focusing on within Chainsaw Man's narrative is people's faces, specifically Denji's. You will get everything that you need. If Denji was a muted character, you would still have enough substance to understand what he's going through, especially within those dark and depressing moments when death is accompanied with it. You see that within his eyes, within his betrayal, the shock, the fear, the nervousness that comes with it. There are many scenes littered throughout the whole story that perfectly describe this. For me, Denji's physical traits, their impact and their influence easily sits 10 out of 10. When it comes to Asa and her physical traits, they're a little bit different. We haven't spent a lot of time with Asa, but still a lot of that Fujimoto flair has come over with her. She's a lot more closed off, a lot more withdrawn, and you can see a lot of these slow and methodical decisions that she makes just by utilizing the artistry surrounding her body. She may roll her shoulders more, she may look down, she may cross her arms. There's so many little bits and pieces that build up Asa and showing how nervous or anxiety ridden she truly is. Now you could argue that this is more difficult to pull off because of the amount of depth behind that anxiety, the amount of depth behind being nervous. There's a lot more ways to play upon it, but it's smaller, it's more incremental, it's valuable, but difficult to put finesse within. Now Asa doesn't really change clothes either, pretty much a school uniform and the occasional outing outfit. Nothing all too telling for what their personality represents, but when it does come to those facial expressions, you get a beautiful amount of it, arguably even more complex than what Denji originally got, which is a hard sell to agree with, I admit, but just go back and read part 2, go look at Asa, go look at how she reacts to every situation she's in, and you perfectly understand what's going through her head. I would say for me personally, for Denji, it's a little bit more difficult to truly understand because he as a character doesn't really understand, but the only reason we know that is because we spent a lot of time with him. Asa wears a lot of herself on her sleeve that unfortunately bites her back. For me, in Asa's physical traits, I would easily give her a 9 out of 10. So far, we have Denji at a 10 out of 10 and Asa a 9 out of 10, rather close. Moving on to behavioral traits. Again, habits, decision making, the choices that they go through that impacts a narrative. Denji here is rather chaotic. It does great to show what type of character he is, but there's no real streamlined understanding. You never really feel comfortable with what Denji is going to do narratively because I don't think he knows what he's going to do. Now, while that may seem like it's framed as a negative, I would say it does a lot to really build up his own personality. He's so chaotic and all over the place that you really just can't put your thumb on what he's going to do next. And he always has a way of surprising you with his decisions, how he thinks about things, how he decides to act on different scenarios. Sometimes he's super crazy and out there. Other times he's a little bit more quiet and reserved, and both are shocking depending on the context of the situation. I would say the backbone or the strength of Denji's personality relies in the habits of others, meaning that he tends to take on a lot of manipulative sources, so Mahima, power, Aki, etc. There's a lot of people within his life that don't mean to manipulate him, but have such an overwhelming presence that he has never had before. So he does everything within his power to keep it, and he is one that is driven by simple goals. He knows exactly what he wants, and he'll do anything to get it, but even when he gets it, it's never really enough, or it changes, or it evolves into something else entirely. So it just kind of loops back into this idea of other people imposing onto him what they think might be better for him, such as Makima, who is very much manipulative on purpose, and you get a character that is struggling to detour further than what they're intended to. To me, this is brilliant. It sparks that fire for Denji's personality and melds perfectly with his physical traits, his facial expressions, how he walks and upholds himself throughout the world. Growth is easily the biggest part of this as well. Just think about chapter 1 and think about the end of the story of part 1 and how far he has truly come. The choices he has made, the decisions, the mental gymnastics, everything that he has experienced and how he's reacted to it has changed him as a person. I hate to do it, but for me personally, it's going to be another 10 out of 10 for Denji's behavioral traits. Now when it comes to Asa, she's a lot more complex. Asa is a character that jumps between emotions a lot. Those emotions affect her choices, so her choices and her emotions are constantly changing. One thing about Asa is that you can't really put your thumb on where she sits either because you don't know how she's going to react to a situation. Very similar to Denji, but within a different scope. This works incredibly well with the design philosophy of her character. She's meant to be nervous. She's meant to be unpredictable within her own right. And a lot of the time she is. She makes choices, she's challenged, she jumps through different hurdles that you would never expect her to do, but she ends up doing regardless. She's someone that overanalyzes, overthinks, gets very emotional. She's completely traumatized by a lot of PTSD. So even though she shares a ton of similarities, almost identical situations or scenarios with Denji and what they've been through, their characters are so entirely different, but also the same, just under a different scope. Their DNA, I would say, is very similar. Something that I've come to really love with Asa is the finesse of her choices. It's never one-dimensional. It's never direct. There's always a build-up, there's always a learning curve, there's always an understanding or an external understanding that has to take place before she does something. It's because she second-guesses herself. It's because she doesn't trust herself, she doesn't trust others. So when you don't have trust in anything, the choices that come to you are never that easily accepted. And while it is a scary and sad thing to have, it works for a gorgeous writing element for her character. Some of the best writing in terms of sensitivity, I would say, personally, has come with Asa. Fujimoto can really explore her mentally and emotionally however he wants. And when you're utilizing those physical traits like we've talked about before, her facial expressions, her bodily movements, everything is just wrapped together perfectly. Now, it may be early on to say this, but I would give her a 10 out of 10 as well. I think Fujimoto has done a perfect job in the small amount of time that we've had with her. So this is what the score is looking at now. Lastly, we have dialogue. Again, this is not about what a character says, but more so how they say it. This can speak to a lot of different things. Denji is very prominent with his dialogue. It fits perfectly within his behavioral traits and his physical traits, is that he is someone that is very uneducated. He's someone that's been through a lot. And while the majority of the story never gives you the reasoning on why he acts the way he is, why he's so simple-minded and a little bit goofy and not very intelligent, even though he's 16 years old, when you find out what he's been through, when you find out the reasoning of why he speaks the way that he does, why he expresses things the way that he does, it all makes sense. One of the best things that has happened throughout Chainsaw Man is watching this challenge and grow. See, when Denji gets put in a position with someone like Makima, someone like Power, someone like Aki, you have 3 different points of references to go off. Power is the closest one to him, channels the same dialogue, channels the same energy, they work beautifully, they're siblings. Aki feels more like a big brother just by the way they talk with each other. So you get a beautiful duality of Denji being like this crazy little brother and Aki being this older brother trying to keep him in line, but sometimes, just barely, they bleed into each other just a little bit. So Denji isn't always off the leash crazy. Sometimes he's more reserved too. Sometimes he takes very sensitive approaches to characters that reflect that same emotion, like Aki. When it comes to Makima, however, he gets very much within his own head. He kind of loses sight of himself, and that's when his dialogue becomes choppier and a little bit more dog-like, because that's what Makima is trying to do. However, when you see that start to grow, him starting to take on traits from the people closest to him, you hear and see a side of Denji that you've never seen before. His speech has a lot more direction. There's a lot more time where he pauses to actually think about what he's going to say, how he's going to react. Hell, there's even instances where he doesn't talk at all because he feels that it is right. It's kind of oddly poetic that the end of the story is him kind of talking to Makima in a really passionate-like way. When she's gone, when she's disappeared, he's the only one that has kind of experienced the worst of it all, yet he still speaks to her with so much emphasis and passion. It says a lot about his character emotionally and how much he has grown throughout this short period of time. He's been through a lot, and that has affected who he is at its core. When it comes to dialogue, it might be a little bit controversial, but I would give Denji a 9 out of 10. Asa, on the other hand, I enjoy quite a bit, maybe even a little bit more than Denji. You see, Asa kind of goes through this story expressing how she feels in a lot of different ways, but because you never actually get the true intention behind her words, almost like she's telling half-truths the entire time, you never truly understand what she means. She may express something, she may say something, she may do something, but you don't have any validity behind it. And it's mostly because she doesn't trust herself. She doesn't trust others. She doesn't mentally or emotionally want to think about things because it starts to bring her down. So she tends to bottle things away quite a bit. When she finally does talk or does try to express things, it usually makes the situation worse. At least that's what she's scared of. However, when she starts to talk with Denji, when she starts to talk with Yuko, for example, you see a side of her that you've never seen before. And while it's only been 20 chapters, the way she emphasizes her words, the way she thinks about things is so incredibly sad. Even though they have been through a lot, I think the negative effect that has hit Asa is a lot harder, a lot more close to home. She doesn't really know how to deal with things, and because of it, it kind of ruins her. When you watch her open up her shell little by little, when she gets challenged, when she gets angry, it's always with someone that means well by her. Denji, for example, is someone that she gets very upset with, and this is the first and only time you ever really get to see her angry, her true self. Now, she wouldn't be game to do this anywhere else. In fact, she's not. But because she feels comfortable, because she feels rather safe, because she feels like she understands Denji quite a bit and honestly considers him a friend just by the way she speaks, they thrive. And you get a very clear understanding of the type of person that Asa is, what she's been through, and what directly hurts her. This might be controversial, but personally, I appreciate her dialogue, the way she expresses things, on the same length, if not higher than what Denji does. And that's not to say that it's quote-unquote objectively better, but more so, I guess, up my alley. I enjoy that type of approach for characters a lot more. The amount of impact that she's had on the narrative because of it, how it links with her behavioral traits, how it links with her physical traits, is so incredibly influential for the 30-odd chapters that we've gotten. It's only a fraction, quarter of what Chainsaw Man's story is, and she's already this prominent. Fujimoto has struck gold with Asa as a character, from head to toe, and for that, I'd have to give her dialogue a 10 out of 10. Unfortunately, this brings us to the end. These are the final scores for each category, and the final verdict, for me personally, is Denji. I'd put him on top, but funny enough, not by a lot. For me, I would say he wins because of the amount of time we've spent with him, the amount of personal appreciation and connection you can build with him, but don't let it fool you. Given more time with Asa, with them growing and kind of connecting with each other, which mind you, Denji still gets better and better over time, she's definitely up there, extremely close, no doubt about it. It's not even a loss to Asa. The fact that she's even relatively close to Denji, in my opinion, is impressive enough as it is. Both are phenomenal characters, but Denji for me comes out on top. With that, however, if you have been grading alongside me, let me know your answers, let me know your results. I'd love to see them. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, a comment. It supports me a ton and I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you kindly.